Welcome to another edition of Live with Andrew. This is the order of operations. It's a continuation of our math lessons that we have done over the past few weeks. This lesson was recorded live on 4/14, but we didn't have it uploaded to YouTube. So I'm having to re-record it, and due to a couple of technical difficulties, I'm having to re-record it several times. So hopefully this one will take, and we'll get this uploaded to YouTube later today, because that's how you would be watching it on YouTube. This lesson, like I said, is order of operations, and I'm doing everything in the line of the past 3 lessons that we've done in math. We'll have another one that continues every Tuesday at 1 o'clock. For more information about that, contact your teacher or email adult.education, and we'll be glad to help you out. Again, I'm doing this lesson exactly as it was done on the 14th, so some of the information may seem a little dated when you see as the program goes on. All right, let's get started. When were we last in class? Well, when this was recorded, we had not been in class for 41 days, I think. Now it's been several, couple of more weeks, so we're getting close to 60 days. It's 50 plus days that we've been out of class, but it seems like it's been forever. We miss being in class. We miss you as the student, and it's what we do. We're teachers, and not being able to teach in a classroom setting has been quite difficult. So hopefully we will get back to that as soon as we can. Now, we know you've been busy doing a lot of important things, uh, lots of visiting with family and spending time with people in your house. And I know there's a lot of this going on as well. A lot of Netflix and slinging and Instagram and Snapchats and watching shows and movies on Disney Plus, or spending time and wasting time on YouTube. I know I do some of those same things, but I want you to remember that we hope you're safe. We hope you're entertaining yourself, and hopefully things will be getting back to normal. Even today, as I record this, the state has lifted some of the restrictions. A lot of the businesses are opening back up. I hope, if those are places you work, that you're safe still and you're able to get back to work, because that's what we want all of our employees to, not employees, but all of our students to do, is be able to go back and get jobs and have jobs and be able to be successful. And hope you're staying safe during this time. Now, all those websites that I showed, from Snapchat to Netflix to all those different things that you can use, remember, you still have access to all the stuff that you had in class. We are here to continue doing everything as normal. We want you to know that we're still here to help however it can be. Use HiSet Academy, GED Academy, and all that on Essential Education, KET, and its fast forward program, as well as the ACT work keys. You can also contact us if you have any questions. I know a lot of times people get locked out, or they can't remember the login or something like that. You can email us or send your teacher a message, and we'll be glad to help out. Khan Academy, I say this every class, it is a great resource for building that fluency and going through and just building up the skills that you need. It is free. It's not anything that you have to pay for. They're actually adding in all the social distancing and quarantine and schools being closed, they have added a lot more free programs on there, even some RLA stuff. I haven't examined a lot of that yet. There's just a million other directions to be pulled right now. So I'm looking into some of that to see if any of that will be beneficial to us as adult education. But you see there the code for our class. Click join and put in our class code, and it'll connect you to us. Also, we have the Smart Start class. It's always available via Canvas. If you have any questions, go to there and they'll be able to help. I'll be able to help you get some of that skills that you need to be able to get jobs, keep jobs, and be the most successful that you can once all this is back to normal. Again, if you have any questions about that, adult.education@rcsd.ms, I will be more than glad to help you. Now we are going to talk about more math. The first class that we did, the class that we had last week, was, well, it was the first class that we did was just kind of some basic math, talking about the importance of operations. This class that we're doing is kind of part 2 of the series, really talks about the order of operations. So we have the basic operations, but then there's a certain order that you need to do that. And that's what we're going to spend some time looking at today. And then the next class, which is already posted on YouTube, it goes a little bit further into some of that and how you use square roots and some of those things. And then we'll have a class following that that kind of gets into a little bit of the beginning of algebra. So that's the first kind of lessons and progression that we have. But today we're going to be talking about some more math, and I cannot stress enough, it's so important. I've mentioned this in every class that I've done, and it's the basis of everything. You've got to be fluent in operations. The adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing are important for everything that you do, and you have to build fluency. If you think of math as a language, you've got to be fluent in that language. Again, I use the example, I know un poco español. That means very little Spanish. I'm not fluent at all, but I know enough to kind of feel my way through. But it is a slow process, and it's really difficult for me. And I can find and use dictionaries and Google Translate and my phone to help me kind of figure my way through. But it's a slow process. The same way in math, you can use a calculator to kind of feel your way through, but knowing and being fluent in the operations are going to make everything else go quicker. And again, it can be your downfall if you're not fluent, because the test is designed to take time. They design problems to make you really have to think. I have students all the time say, I had a calculator, I didn't even need it because I couldn't use it because the problems weren't set up for a calculator. It's not where they just give you a list of problems that you're just going to have to solve. It's word problems where you have to think and you have to problem solve using those basic operations. The stuff we've worked on in the past few weeks, even with the Pythagorean theorem that we talked about on it was last week's class in the part 3, which this one's part 2. When we talk about that, you have to do the operations. It's just multiplying, it's just dividing, and it's using exponents and stuff, but that's all it is. And if we can take those and then take some of the ratios that we also talked about in some of the problems, it's just multiplying and dividing. So when we have those skills, even though it's a higher level math skill, you're still doing the basic operation. So you have to know how to do those. And like I've mentioned several times, yes, you have a calculator, but the quicker you can do those operations of adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, the more successful you'll be on the test. All right, so we want to make sure that you know that. Now, last week we did talk about, in the previous lesson, multiplication is used in squares. So when you think about squares, they're shapes, it's multiplication. You have the squares and you have charts, and you can kind of see how that works together. We want you to be very familiar. You've got to have your multiplication tables down. If you don't know your multiplication facts, it's going to slow everything down. It's one of the basis or base skills that you need to do for everything there. And again, I'm using just the chart that I showed you last week. The only difference is, instead of having an X between the numbers, 1 times 1, I just put a big dot. And the reason I'm using the big dot instead of an X, when we get into algebra later, X means something else. And it's important for us to start to see math in ways that we're going to be presented with math. They very rarely use an X anymore on the GED test or HiSET test. It's going to be a dot to represent multiplication. It could also be a parenthesis, which we'll talk about in just a little bit as well. But it's important that we see this. And if you see, these are the squares that we're talking about. It's just 1 times 1, 2 times 2, 3 times 3, so forth and so on, all the way down through 12. And again, like last week, this is the previous lesson, you could show that same thing. If you look at the example that we have there, and 6 times 6 equals 36 down at the bottom, well, I could say that quicker by saying just 6 squared equals 36, because 6 times 6, that tells me to multiply it times itself twice. So that's where I get the 36, and that's the square of 6. All the squares that we have here, these are the perfect squares. It's important to know these. You need to. GED says you need to know all your squares through 15. You just need to know those. That's going to help you in a lot of skills. The lesson that comes next, in lesson 3 that we have in this series about Pythagorean theorem, you're going to use squares the whole time. That's a geometry skill that's going to be there. And again, like I've mentioned in the past, when you're looking at these numbers, it's important for you to start to see the relationship between the numbers. If you see 8, you can know, okay, 8 squared, 64. 2 times 4 gives me 8. 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, 56, 64, 72, 80, 88. Knowing your times tables or knowing the multiples of 8, you start to see those connections with stuff. 9 times 12 is, or 8 times 12 is 96. Being able to know those, they're going to repeat a lot of those numbers a lot. And like I've mentioned in the past, if you start to see certain numbers, there's certain numbers that group together a lot. It's the same way if you think about you and your friends, you and your best friend. People probably wonder whenever they see you without your best friend, they go, hey, where's your friend? Because you're usually together. I know there's a couple students in class that if one's not there, I know the other one's not going to be there. I don't know if they meet in the parking lot and decide to come or not, or how that works, but usually we see people coming together. It's because there's connections there. There's relationships between people in the same way there's relationships between numbers. So the more fluent and familiar you are with numbers, the more you're going to start to see those connections and those relationships. And that's what we want to look at and do. Now, when we talked about this last week, this is, again, a little bit of a repeat of this. And I want you to just be able to look back at it and see. If this little 2 at the top means to multiply itself 2 times, then the square root sign, and again, this square root sign is the one that we're familiar with. We see it a lot, but we want to make sure that we understand that little square root has the line across the top of it as well. So like I'm drawing it in there so you can see. Most of the time we see it that way, and it looks like a division sign, but the difference between the division sign and this is that little kind of kicker off on the side. That little part on the side that sticks out there, that's what makes it the square root instead of a division problem. Now, multiplication is repeated addition. 3 times 3 is like saying we have 3, 3, and 3. So 3 groups of 3 is 9. If we do the exponent, we just say 3 squared. It's just multiplying. It's just exponents are a way of doing multiplication quicker. Square root is a way of doing division quicker. So they're all kind of connected there. That interconnectedness is something that, again, like building fluency, is important to see and to understand that so you can go forward. So as we see this, 3 squared equals 9, or 3 times 3 equals 9. 9, the square root of 9, is equal to, and again, all I'm doing is just looking at what we have here. It's looking at 9 and you say, okay, well, 9 equals 3 times 3. So with the square root of 9, we look at it and see, okay, 3 times 3, that's the square that makes 9, and that's where we understand the square root of 9 is 3. And that's how we can take one of those 3's out, because we're finding the square of that. So you can kind of see how that works. So I'm going to move to this next slide, and I want you to just solve these squares, okay? There are 6 squares here. You can pause it, solve it. When you're done solving these, press play, and we'll continue. All right, so you've had a chance to work these, and as you've gone through and solved for these squares, you're going to look at them and just go through the answers with me here. And I'm just going to flip to the next slide that has the answers there. The square root, and again, if you want to draw the top across, you can for each of these. I kind of like to do that. The PowerPoint and the font that I use does not have a top on it. That kind of frustrates me, but we'll make do with what we got there. But as you see each one of them, 25 squared is 5. 49, square root of 49 is 7. The square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 81 is 9. Square root of 144 is 12. Now, I didn't give you the square root of 169, but as you start to do these and you look at the numbers, a lot of times you look at it and go, well, I know what this one is, so maybe that one's the next one. And you could have done a quick little math, just 13 times 13, and that would have given you the square there. It's important to kind of see how these numbers work together and start to understand these a little bit better. So again, like I mentioned before, square roots are the opposite of squares. So we have squares, and you see in the first column, it's 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared, all the way to 6 squared, and then it shows the square root of those. So you see this kind of goes up to a point, and then it comes back down a point. So like you see how these are connected, and I want you to be familiar and comfortable with these as we go through them. The more you see them, the more you do them, the better it'll be. And again, doing a chart like this, helping you to see it and write it out, is a good way to do it. I made this chart myself. I had to just sit here and type it out. I can do these very quickly because I've seen them, I've practiced them, I've gone through them a lot. It's important to do that, to build that fluency. And you may go, I got a calculator that'll do that. Yeah, but you need to know it here, not just how to punch it in on a calculator, because seeing these numbers and the relationships between them makes a whole lot more sense. It helps you to understand the bigger picture of what's going on. And we'll talk about that more in the next few weeks. The next lessons, if you haven't watched them all yet, you'll see those and go, oh, now I see why I need to do that. And again, to be able to problem solve, we need to free up our brain to do what it needs to do, to figure out the problems that they're asking us. If we're having to use a lot of brain power to do basic operations and try to figure out what the numbers even mean, then we don't have the energy and the capacity to problem solve. And that's where the test is designed. It's designed to be a problem solving test. So they give you computations and computations you got to do that will mess you up. So it's important to have this operation stuff down pat. So that frees you up to actually figure out, okay, how am I going to solve this problem? Now, when we look at these and we see that the exponent of 2 means to multiply it times itself 2 times, then a little 3, the exponent of 3 must mean to multiply it 3 times. And the little 4 must mean to multiply 4 times. You put that number down that many times. And that's exactly it. So when we have 3 squared equals 9, we see it's 3 times 3. So we write 3 2 times. So you see it's 2 times. If we see 3 cubed, or 3 to the 3rd power, we're going to write it 3 times. And that's where that one is. If we see 3 to the 4th power equals 81, that's 3 how many times? 4 times. So anytime you see the little exponent there, that's how many times you're going to multiply it times itself. Now, as you're doing this, again, think about basic operations. If you have a calculator, great. If you don't have a calculator, you're going to have to come up with an easy way to do these computations. So if I look at it and I go, well, 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, I see that 3 times 3 is 9. Well, let me look at the next part, though. If 3 times 3 is 9, well, I know 3 times 3 is 9. Well, now I have 3 times 3 times 3. So that's 9 times 3, which gives me the 27. And you can break it down into smaller parts. If I know 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 times 3 is 9, well, 9 times 9, that's what gives me 81. So I can see simpler ways to do this. And again, knowing my basic numbers, you don't have to necessarily know, well, 3 to the 4th power is 81. I don't always remember that. But I know how to do the basic operation. So I know, oh, let me just multiply that. 9 and 9, oh, 81. So that's a way you can kind of check yourself. Again, the more you do this, the quicker you'll be at it, and the more comfortable you'll be with it. So it's important to look at that as you go through. All right. Now, what if it was a 1? Or what would it be if it was a 0? So if you want to pause it, think about it for a second, see what answers you come up with. All right. All right, now that you've had time to think about this one, to see, as you're looking at this, 3 to the 1st power, so if with 3 squared, we wrote it 3 times, so 3 with a 1, or 3 to the 1st power, then maybe we're going to write it 1 time, and that's exactly it. So 3 to the 1st power is just 3. We only write it one time. How many times do you write it? That's the exponent tells you that's how many times you write the number. But with 0, the answer is 1. And why is the answer 1? That's something that kind of makes us go, I don't know why it's 1. I wasn't sure either. I knew it was 1 a long time ago, but I wasn't sure why it was 1. So I did some investigating, and actually, Khan Academy, I get no endorsements from them, but I'm telling you, at Khan Academy, they are great. I went to there and watched some videos to see what's the explanation behind it. And this is the best explanation that I got for it. It's something that, as we look at it and see, you may go, okay, I don't need to know that. Well, this helps you to better understand it. I like to teach you more than just, here's how you pass the test. I want to give you a little bit more background with it. But no, if you see a 0 there, it's 1. No matter what. If it's a 0, it's 1. So here's why. Every time you have an exponent, if it's a 0, we write it 0 times, but all exponents there have an invisible 1 times on it. So when we look at it and we see in the first one, 1 squared is 1 times 1, but there's that extra 1 times 1 in front of it. So all these little 1 times 1s that we see here, they're hanging out on every single one of them. 5 squared is 1 times 5 times 5. So you have that 1. That's how many times you're going to do it there. So when you see 3 to the 0 power over here on this far side, that means we're going to say 1 times, and then how many times are we going to write 3? 0 times. So that leaves us with just the 1. And that helps you to better kind of understand why the problem's there. So anytime you see a 0 exponent, what is the answer? 1, no matter what the number is. So on this page, quickly, what's the answer to each of these? 3 answers. If you want to pause it and work them out, you can do that. You may not need to pause it because you should know what they are really quickly. That's right. The answer to each one of those is 1. That's it. It's a big 1 because 23 to the 0 power, 1. X to the 0 power, 1. 100 to the 0 power, 1. It doesn't matter. And you may go, whoa, wait a second. You put an X there. Yes, I did. Doesn't matter. It's 1. Anything to the 0 power is 1. So whenever you see an exponent of 0, you know that whatever it's connected to there is 1. All right, and that may come in to help us on something we're going to look at in a little bit. So why on earth do we need to know all these operations? You talked about this. We talked about addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, exponents. This is all part of the order of operations. All right, when we go through and we're learning math, it's important for us to know, one, how to do all the skills, but then how to use those tools appropriately. The order of operations is so crucial to doing all the math. You cannot do the math right if you don't follow the order of operations. I've been doing a lot of cooking at home while we're in quarantine of different things, and a lot of recipes are very specific on how you have to cook them. If you try to add one ingredient before another ingredient, or you do one step before another step, your whole recipe is going to be ruined. It's important that you follow the process the right way. It's like, would you bake a cake before you add the ingredients? Well, no, stupid. There's no way you're going to do that. Well, the same thing in math. You have to follow the order of operations. You have to do things in a certain series. If you don't, it's going to be just as goofy or just as messed up as baking a cake before you put the ingredients in it. All right. So what is the order of operations? You probably learned PEMDAS that you see on the screen there. Please excuse my dear Andrew Strelo. That's me, so I like to put Andrew Strelo. You probably heard it with old Aunt Sally. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally there. Where the P is please, E's excuse, M, my, dear, so forth and so on. But they also stand for please is parentheses, E is exponents, M is multiplication, then D's division, A's addition, and S is subtraction. Now, when you see these, this is the order that we follow. We do those steps in that order. So anytime there's a problem, We must do whatever's in the parentheses first. We've got to take care of the parentheses first. Then, after we've done everything that has to do with the parenthesis, then we're going to switch to the exponents, and we're going to do the exponents portion. Anything that's connected to the exponents. Then we're going to multiply and divide, and then we're going to add and subtract. Now, this is where it gets a little different. Sometimes this idea of PEMDAS is incomplete. People think, well, I've got to multiply before I divide because my comes before dear. It's important to know, though, multiplication and division are actually together. You have to do those at the same time. And they use this my dear and Aunt Sally to help people remember it better in the acrostic there that you have. But it's important for us to understand multiplication and division, they're equal. Addition and subtraction, they're equal. So what we're going to do those at the same time from left to right. So PEMDAS is what I learned in school, what you probably learned in school, but now it's kind of incomplete. That thought needed to be built upon. So what they came up with is GEMS. Please excuse my dear Andrew Strela. Okay, that's the original, but the new way is GEMS, and it stands for, G stands for groupings. Again, it doesn't just say parentheses because there's lots of different types of groupings. Parentheses, brackets, braces, a lot of those different things. So not just the parenthesis, it is a grouping, but there's other groupings to remember. Exponents stays the same in GEMS. Exponents are done after groupings. You do groupings, then you do exponents. Then you get to M, which is multiplication and division, and the key on this part is from left to right. We always work from left to right. It's like reading a book. You start on the left side of the page and read back to the right. Addition and subtraction, that's the last one there. Now, I deliberately did this different. It's GEMS because it wants you to remember S, but I put addition before subtraction because I want to emphasize to you, it does not matter which comes first. You always work it from what? Left to right. If you don't remember anything else, remember when you're working math, we work, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, or GEMS, but for multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, work from left to right, just like a book. You always want to work from left to right on this, okay? Can't emphasize that enough to you. It's so important that you do those in that order. All right, now, here's 6 problems, and you can take a few seconds to work these 6 problems. All right, so work these 6 problems out. Get a little tricky, but take your time, pause it, take all the time that you need. When you're ready, we will come back and finish working those, and I'll work them out with you. All right, now that you've had time to do these, we're going to look at each one and kind of see what the answers would be there. All right, so on this one, we're going to start working at the top left corner and work our way through it. So with this first one, we have 5 plus 9 times 2. So remember, we're going to use our order of operations. We do groupings, okay? So I'm going to use GEMS. Now, one of the things I tell people to do and this is how I do it, this is how I tell people to do it, if you want to use GEMS, write it at the top of your page. Just go ahead and put it on there. That way you can kind of keep yourself straight on what you have to do. Or if you wanted to write it down the side, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, whatever it might be, put it there. So do you have any groupings? And I kind of look at it like this, okay, groupings, there's no groupings. All right, exponents, there's no exponents. So now I'm to multiplication, division, subtraction, and addition. So I need to multiply and divide. So with this, to multiply and divide, what I need to do first is multiply 9 times 2, which is 18. Now I'm left with 5 plus 18. So I'm to finish that part. Now I'm to the next part. What do? I add and subtract. There's only one thing. 5 plus 18 is 23. So I went through it step by step to get my answer. I do the same thing now for the other side. I have a grouping though. There's a parenthesis. So I need to do, and if I want to use, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, Go ahead and write that down the side of my paper there. So as I go through, I know I have groupings first. So inside that grouping, it's 12 minus 3. 12 minus 3 is 9. So that's the first thing I do, what's in the parenthesis. Now I'm left with 4 times 9. It's just a multiplication problem. So I don't have exponents. I'm just a multiplication. That gives me an answer of 36. All right, so you see how that's done. Now, if you notice there, I'm only doing one step at a time. These are pretty simple problems, so it is just one step at a time. But I'm going to tell you, we have plenty of paper. You have plenty of practice space. Try not to do too many steps at one time. That's where people get messed up. So take your time. Work one step at a time. On this next one, this is where you can get in trouble if you try to jump ahead of yourself. All right, so we need to remember, again, I'm going to write it at the top. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, and I apologize for writing with a mouse. It's a little crooked there. But first is parentheses. So when I see this, I see what's in the parentheses. So I'm going to just say 1 plus 2, which gives me 3. Now, if you notice, I just straight down, all I've done is that one step. A lot of people look at this and they think, oh, 6 divided by 2, well, that's going to be 3. And then I have my parenthesis, and that's going to be 3. And that's where I'm at. But that is not correct. A lot of people get this problem wrong because they try to do it that way. All right, so you've got to look at this and see what you're doing, okay? Once you get to there, which that ended up being correct, but I didn't want you to get ahead, all right? What you want to do is make sure that you're doing the steps in order. And a lot of people, where they get this one wrong, is they look at it and say, well, there's still a parenthesis, 2 times 3, that should be 6. And then it's 6 divided by 6. But when we got to this step and that middle step there, when we're looking at the step that's 6 divided by 2, parenthesis 3, even though it's a parenthesis there, that parenthesis just means multiplication at that point. And it's just 6 divided by 2 times 3. So that's just multiplication. And remember, we work from left to right. So as we're doing that, we've got to start on this side and do what's first. And that's what gives us the 3 and not the 6 if we're doing it the other way. And then when that works all the way out, your answer should be 9 on that one. All right. On your next one there, you have 10 times 4 squared plus 8 minus 2. The very first step is going to be 4 squared, which is 16. And if you notice, I just brought everything down there. Okay, everything was brought straight down. So now I can do the next step. What's 10 times 16? That's going to be 160. But wait a second, I did 2 things there. I just told you not to do that. Well, 1, for space sake on the PowerPoint, and 2, if I know the next step is going to be, okay, once I get that multiplication and I know that 160 is 10 times 16, I know that's where that's going. Everything on this side, I know that it's on the opposite side of that plus sign. I could go ahead and do that because addition and subtraction can be done left to right. So if I go ahead and do that, that is a little bit of a time saver, but I'm more comfortable with that. And I've done this enough where I can see that. If not, if you wanted to wait, you could have gotten 160 plus 8 would be 168, minus 2 would be 166, which is the answer. Or 8 minus 2 is 6, then you add it to 160 like we did here. All right, so again, I tell you, work out step by step. Try not to do 2 steps at once if you can help it. If it gets down to just the addition and subtraction, that's where you can combine a couple steps there. But what you don't want to do is add 16 plus 8 before you multiply times 10. You've got to follow that order of operations. All right, our last 2 that we have here, 3 parentheses 2 plus 3 parentheses squared minus 8. So as we're looking at this one, it's a little bit different. We've got to do our order of operations, so we're going to do parentheses first. So I need to do what's inside the parenthesis very first. 2 plus 3 is 5. So now I have 3 parentheses 5 squared minus 8. So now, following the order of operations, exponents comes after groupings. So that 2 is connected to the 5. That's something that messes people up sometimes. They'll try to multiply 3 times 5, then square it, but I've got to do the exponent first. When I do that, that's going to be 3 times 25, 3 parentheses 25 minus 8. Again, I do what the 3 times 25 is, which is 75 minus 8, which gives me 67. And you can see how those steps just go straight down there. Now, this last one, hopefully you didn't spend too much time on it, because there's a little trick in there that we learned just today. Now, following the order of operations, we got to do what's in the parentheses, right? But if I know, okay, I need to do what's in the parenthesis, but I notice there's a 0 hanging out there. What's anything to the 0 power? We know automatically is 1. So I know everything inside of that parenthesis is 1. So it's going to be 1 times 7, or 7 to the first power. I know that. But let's say we didn't, and we just went ahead and worked it. It would be 7 parenthesis 4 plus 40,353, 607, or 40,353,607 minus 64. And then we could do that next step and get to there. But then at this step, that's where it's going to end up being, I've been actually wrote it twice, I'm sorry. It's going to end up being 1. We know it's going to be 1, because that's what anything to the 0 power is 1. And the answer to that one would just be 7. Now, when you know exponents and you're familiar with that, it could save you a lot of that math. Even if you had a calculator, that's a lot of stuff to put in there. So it's important to know the concepts and to know the understanding of it, so you'll be able to do this a little bit better. Now, like I just said, we did all that math. It's a whole lot easier just to do that and just say it's 7 to 1 to the first power, which is, or 7 to the 0 power, which is just 1. That's something that, again, the more familiar and the more fluent you are in the math, the better you'll see that. All right, if you'd like more practice on order of operations, let me know. You can send comments in there, send an email to me at adult.education. Be more than glad to help you out, give you some extra practice on that as we move forward, especially into algebra, which is going to be the lesson that we do the next, not the next lesson, but the lesson after that. It's crucial to getting the correct answer is to do things in the right order. You have to do it in the right order. Otherwise, it's all going to fall apart. A great place, again, to practice this fluency is Khan Academy. If you want to work on order of operations, go to Khan Academy. In the search bar, type order of operations. It'll give you all the information that you need for that. As we close, remember, social distancing, practice all that, but we record these and do it on Tuesday. Remember Taco Tuesday. Everybody loves a taco. It'll make you at least smile during this time of quarantine. Plus, get out and support your local businesses, your local Mexican restaurants and Taco Bell and other places like that, or wherever you want to go. Take care. I hope you're well. If you have any questions, put it in the message box. You can also email me if you have any questions about anything. Contact your teachers as well. We are here to help you in any way that we can. Hope you have a great day, and we will see you next time.